Father Stephen, as I gave away a little bit that he was a piano man in the bar. I don't know that he played piano, but he did play music in the bar and make money at it. So, but he was born in South Carolina. I won't tell you what year he was born. He can tell you that part. But he graduated from Furman University in 1977 with a BA in classical languages. So my daughter might be interested in that. He has an MDiv from Seabury Western Theology Seminary in 1980. And he got his MA in religion from Duke University in 1991. He was ordained in the ministry of the Episcopal Church in 1980, and he converted in 1998 to Orthodoxy and became a priest in the Orthodox Church. He's written a few books, if you'll see there in the back there, that you can, thanks, the lovely model Father Deacon Philip. Is it showing there? Yes. You can buy those books there, and I'm sure that you can get Father Stephen to sign them for you as well. So he's that kind of guy. He's written a couple of books. He's also written about 1,600 different articles, and he is very much into the culture. He engages the culture. He has over 40,000 comments on his blogs from people from all varieties of life, and so he loves to engage people, and he writes on topics that are very relevant to what people are thinking about. And that's why we're very interested in the topic today, as we spoke about what should we talk about. And this whole idea how to become human in a secular world is something that is increasingly more difficult for us every day. So he's also started a number of churches in the Appalachian region. And he may or may not talk about that, but he does have an accent, so I'll just say some might have to have some interpreters here to help understand it. But it's not Tennessee. It's somewhere between Tennessee and South Carolina is where he resides. So with that, I'd like to welcome Father Stephen for coming up and coming out here and speaking, and we look forward to hearing you. Thank you.
This week I had the neatest little note from someone from Ireland, and he was writing being Orthodox in Ireland, living in Limerick, Ireland, and are nearby. And anyway, he said he has to commute about an hour or so each day. He said, but he listens to my podcast, and he was commenting about that. He said, so when you're doing these things and imagining an audience, he said, imagine an Irish Orthodox driving over the hills in Ireland. I just thought, golly, gee, I'm not going to be able to talk with that. It's so exotic. But I've been traveling a good bit this year and speaking around. It's been, and I've got more coming up, and we'll probably be increasing that over the next few coming years. I think one of the things that I see is much that I've seen on from writing and podcasting, and that is, as Jeff said, that there are certain issues in our culture that do seem to engage us all, and especially if you're Orthodox, they certainly engage you because it's sort of hard to overlook. But we'll be looking today at becoming human in a secular world. You know, there's a shift going on in our culture. I mean, we've been in one form of modernity or another for better than 200 years. Although I think the bulk of it's been really beginning in the 19th century and ahead. But the pace of things has really picked up, and we've had some critical shifts in our culture. And I think most people would be willing to agree that we're sort of at one of those critical points, a crisis point. For some people, that might feel like a really good crisis, and for others, a really frightening crisis. But you could pretty easily get some agreement that there is a crisis. And it's either bright encouragement or deep sadness. And I'm no prophet, so I won't be speculating about what will come to pass, although I'm not expecting anytime soon that America as a whole is going to embrace the Orthodox faith and add a cross to our flag. I'm afraid if we do add a cross to our flag, it won't be an Orthodox cross. So anyway, that could happen. You never know. But where the consensus would break down would be in describing the nature of the critical moment that we're at. Some might describe it as a crisis of faith. America seems increasingly post-Christian. Europe is decidedly post-Christian. But my candidate for the crisis of our time is actually a crisis of becoming human. The great debate of our time is not actually God, though that is an important debate, but maybe even for human beings like us, more frightening is that the really great debate of our time centers in what it actually just means to be a human being. And that, I would suggest, is at the very heart of the Christian faith. The great proclamation of our faith that is unique in Christianity, the great proclamation of our faith is that God has become man in the person of Jesus Christ. We say that Christ was fully God and fully man. And more than that, it's correct to say that Christ himself, in many ways, is the first and only fully human being. That he is the model. When we say that we are created according to the image and likeness of God, Christ is the image of the invisible God, it says in Scripture. He is the image according to which we are created. So in the proclamation of the Christian faith was not just a proclamation about what it means and who God is, but it was always from the beginning a proclamation about what it means to be human. And Christianity ushered in one of the great revolutions in human history as that definition and understanding spread. Everything that today people talk about as human rights are rooted in the Christian understanding, that it is grounded in the fact that we are created in the image and likeness of God. Archbishop Dimitri of blessed memory, Dallas, who was my bishop for so many years, always said that the great crisis of our modern time was centered around the denial that human beings are in fact the image and likeness of God. Some of what we see in the denigration of women, for instance, in certain parts of the world under certain religions is rooted in the fact that they do not believe themselves, the men either, to be created in the image and likeness of God. So you can't even really have a good argument. You know, the way, at least, even with a secular non-believer, they'll pretty well have some notion in their head that human beings have an inherent dignity and worth. And even if they don't believe in God, they are expressing a leftover effect of the fact that you live in a culture that believes that we are created in the image and likeness of God. The philosopher Protagoras in ancient Greece famously said, "Man is the measure of all things," and the Christian response is yes, and Christ is the measure of man. So, in our modern world, though, more than anything else, if you want to, modern does not mean technology, by the way. We have to get over this. That's a myth that modern is technology. I was reading a book the other day on the Holy Cross Press, published up in the Greek Orthodox Seminary, looking at medical practices in Byzantium. And one of the chapters had a whole list of medical advances made in Byzantium. And I was reading through this and I thought, good heavens. First off, they had medicine. They performed surgery. They were constantly learning and growing. Of course, the myth for us in our Western world is that learning began in the Renaissance. So you have, the beginnings of medical schools in Italy and Padua and places like that. They just fail to tell the backstory, and that is the reason there was a Renaissance was because Constantinople fell, the Byzantine Empire fell, and their scholars left and primarily first came to Italy and taught them how to paint. Yes, how to paint, how to do medicine, how to do math. Same was true of the great flowering of Islamic culture. and the Alhambra built in Spain, and all of these things like that. You do not have people who come out of Saudi Arabia who suddenly know how to build arches. They know how to sew tents. So how did they learn how to build arches? They conquered Byzantium. How did they learn to do algebra? They conquered Byzantium. Learning throughout the history of the world has been a continual thing, and it grows by generation to generation. It was happening under the Greeks. There's a funky little machine they found in a shipwreck in the Mediterranean. It dates back to 200 and something BC. That's called the Antikythera device, which is the island it was found near. And this little machine, they finally figured it out, cleaned it up, and built a copy of it. It will calculate. This little machine thing will calculate the position of the sun and the moon and the eclipses and a whole lot of range of things that, it's a little computer of sorts. It's a mechanical device. And first off, it's really hard. It's just amazing because these things, they don't move just in circles. They do funny things, and it was all this stuff to calculate it. This is before Christ. This kind of thing happened. The modern world did not invent technology. It just markets it. Okay? It markets it. When I critique the modern world, people go, "Do you not want toilets?" And I'm thinking, who do you think invented the things, they're probably Byzantine, I don't know. But although in Turkey, they'd have not discovered that was invented. And we need to go bring a little civilization back to that place. In the Holy Land, when you travel, they will tell you whether this bathroom, they call it a Turkish bathroom, which means it's a hole in the ground. And I'm thinking, at least at my grandparents who had a privy out back, we had a place to sit, for heaven's sakes, and, buy these people some wood. But in our modern world, the real root of modernity is a vast project for the remaking of what it means to be human. This is the heart of modernity. And what is strange is that there's actually very little conversation about the project itself. We're busy doing it, and we argue over details, little nibbles of ethical medical law. They just approved playing around with the genome of embryos in England. Just chip away, chip away, chip away. Without understanding, what are you doing? Without talking about that, without talking about it. All they worry about is that they might accidentally mess something up. Well, I want to think aloud today about what the project is. Many scholars write about what's termed the modern project, and I use that term. It's a set of principles and historic decisions that have set out the path that we generally describe as the modern period. Its roots are in the Enlightenment in the 18th century, the 1700s, but it was largely the 19th century, the 1800s, that the project took root and began to dominate our thinking and our culture. It's kind of interesting to be here in a town founded in the middle 1800s around the gold thing, and in fact, California is one of the great first inventions of the modern project. Everybody moved out here from somewhere, and there's a lot of cultural demographics about California that make it modern. But here's a couple of primary assumptions of the modern project. One is a belief that human beings are autonomous centers of consciousness. I think, therefore I am. I'm a center of consciousness, and I get to do that myself. My identity, we think, is rooted in the fact that I'm conscious and aware. It's the center of myself, and it belongs to me alone. I may choose to share with others and make common cause with others, but I am defined only by myself. And it's the heart of individualism. I'm sure all those gold fellows were out here were just pretty rugged, wild, crazy individuals here. And I don't know if they've got descendants running around wild and crazy, but I would not be surprised. But a second idea, that our choices and decisions bring about our self-actualization. Who I am in the world is a product of my experiences and the choices and decisions I make. And those decisions, we think, create our identity. They are my means of actualization. My decisions and my choices are what determine the meaning of my life. That is, I am who I choose to be. I am who I choose to be. Note that both of these fundamental principles are centered in what it means to be human. But here's an interesting contemporary quote. One of the most frightening modern quotes I can think of. This quote says, "At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life." That's Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy writing in the 1992 decision of Casey versus Planned Parenthood. It's actually among the most radical assertions of individual liberty ever put forward, but it resonates in our culture. We are autonomous centers of consciousness. Liberty is the right to define my own concept of existence, the mystery of life, the meaning of the universe, which is kind of big, you know. Justice Kennedy, in fact, though, did not need to cite anything as authoritative. I mean, he just made that up. He just said that. He didn't quote the Constitution. He just made it up and asserted it. But he could get away with it because everybody thinks it. I mean, he just gave voice to an idea in our culture. And, so he sold it and got, some other guys to agree with him, enough to have a simple majority. And such thoughts, though, about what it means to be human have consequences for what we think about God, that is, if we think about him at all. And it's worth looking for a moment at what God looks like to our popular culture. This is always, I get this all the time when I'm talking. Sometimes I get brave on my blog and I write articles that are trolling for atheists. Why? Because I like those conversations. Sometimes atheists have much more interesting things to say than Christians, and some Christians have nothing interesting to say at all. But atheists are, But usually, when I meet an atheist or engage an atheist, one of my first questions is, "Tell me about the God you don't believe in." I probably don't believe in that one either. And and I've noticed there's Baptist atheists, there's Catholic atheists, there's Buddhist atheists, although that's kind of an oxymoron of sorts, or a tautology, I suppose, really. But popular religion, when you say God, our culture has an idea what they think that is, and certain assumptions. In 2005, Albert Mohler Jr. published a work called Moralistic Therapeutic Deism. Well, that was a real seller of a title. Moralistic Therapeutic Deism, the New American Religion. They're going to need a better caption for that. They're going to kind of sell it in the church. But his analysis was based on surveys of 3,000 teens, that repository of modern knowledge. But he should have tweeted the book. But anyway, it has become a very popular read, frankly, because it's just accurate. He surveys 3,000 teens about God, what they believe about God, and lo and behold, that pretty well is what the culture thinks. I hear his undertones of his analysis repeatedly in popular conversations about God. He noted 5 primary aspects of this cultural version. 1, a God exists. Don't have to know who he is, but a God exists who created and ordered the world and watches over human life on earth. Kind of a general. You say God, that's kind of, okay, he created us and he sort of watches over us. 2, God wants people to be good, nice, and fair to each other as taught in the Bible and by most world religions. Good, nice, and fair. 3, the central goal of life is to be happy and to feel good about oneself. Yeah, how's that working out for you? Anyway, number 4, God does not need to be particularly involved in one's life, except when God is needed to resolve a problem. Yeah. And 5th, good people go to heaven when they die. And I guess it goes back up to number 2, good, nice, and fair. Because I sure don't want any people in heaven that aren't good, nice, and fair. When modern man becomes the measure of all things, then God becomes measured by the needs of modern man. Okay. And please forgive me, by the way, if I offend anybody's sensitivities by using the word man in a generic sense. It just sounds better as English. And forgive me, I'm a classicist, so that's how I talk. I also do it with a slight Appalachian lilt. You mentioned that. I actually, this is my second language. And people ask me about English. I go, yes, I didn't learn English until I was a teenager. Prior to that, I spoke an Appalachian dialect that some of y'all would have a hard time understanding. That if I said, Mama left the chicken on the stove and now it's burnt. Ruined. Burnt. Yeah, that's my dialect. So anyway, when modern man becomes the measure of things, then God becomes measured by the needs of modern man. I want to look for a minute there at these 5 assumptions I just went through. We do want someone to look out for us and watch over us. That's a pretty common thing in our culture. Regina Spektor, I like song lyrics. They do help explain things. There's a reason why we sing the way we do. Regina Spektor, in her song Laughing With, she says, no one laughs at God in a hospital. No one laughs at God in a war. No one's laughing at God when they're starving or freezing or so very poor. No one laughs at God when the doctor calls after some routine test. No one's laughing at God when it's gotten real late and their kid's not back from the party yet. No one laughs at God when their airplane starts to uncontrollably shake. That one made me nervous. No one's laughing at God when they see the one they love hand in hand with someone else and they hope that they're mistaken. No one laughs at God when the cops knock on their door and they say, we've got some bad news, sir. No one's laughing at God when there's a famine or fire or flood. We want someone to watch over us in these kinds of situations of helplessness. Our brave humanity wilts and withers in the face of certain situations. Second, God wants people to be good and nice and fair to each other, as taught in the Bible and most world religions. Well, this is not entirely wrong. It is, however, easily nothing more than code language for a bourgeois ethic. That is, God wants people to behave like nice middle-class Americans, white people. I notice we're pretty white in here. That's America. God wants people to behave like nice middle-class Americans, and for growing numbers of people who will never enter the middle class and an increasing number in our economy, such definitions are a joke. I volunteer once a week in a drug and alcohol rehab center that is an Appalachian shoestring operation. It's a Christian thing, and they let me come in dressed like this, but I'm talking to, there's the epidemic of addiction to meth and opioids is huge in East Tennessee. It's huge. And maybe all of Tennessee, I know all of America, but in East Tennessee it's really become a huge epidemic. And to talk about being good and nice and fair, how about just getting me to tomorrow? Their humanity has been eaten away. They do not look out at a good possibility of achieving the middle class. They would like to just achieve a life. I really, really like working with them because there's not a lot of bull. They got somebody who's there because they know that if they're not there, they're going to die. You can actually have a conversation with a person like that. A real conversation. And we talk about God, and it better be something more than a God who needs us to be good and nice and fair. What's lacking in that notion of what God wants us to be is an account of suffering. That's what's lacking in it. Or any suggestion of why people should suffer willingly. And I'll come back to that later, but suffice it to say for the moment that there is no such thing as an ethic in Christianity that is not a suffering ethic. Okay? We have become a culture that does not understand suffering. We like to bring up God in the context of suffering, primarily under the heading of why. Okay? But we'll get back to that. The third thing, the central goal of life is to be happy and to feel good about oneself. When the purpose of life is to be happy and to feel good, then what we're really saying is that consumerism has become a form of spirituality. Because shopping is pretty well the American means of becoming happy and feeling good. There's some people actually use shopping as a treatment for depression. I do sometimes. I mean, come on, let's all get real about it. You're just feeling bad. A little shopping picks you up, you know. You go to the mall or something like that, you know. Last year I had the great delight of buying a car for my wife. Lord have mercy, it felt so good. You know, especially every time she lets me drive it. But anyway, but it's become a form of spirituality. It's the deformation of the truth of our humanity into its lowest possible form. Consumerism is, I mean, yum, 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 yum. This is animal. There's nothing particularly rational about it. This is life lived under the passions, to become a consumer. And then to have a consumer spirituality, God help us. I had an opportunity recently to visit in a local Christian bookstore. That's what it's called, Christian store. It sells other Christian stuff, kind of. They get upset about us with icons and things, but then they've got like little kitschy statues of things like that. I'm thinking, really? Really? You guys are upset with us? You know, they say we worship saints. We do not, but we don't worship our football teams either. But anyway, that's big. That's big. I know if I was in the South, I'd have to be careful about how I said that. You know, is he talking about Peyton? No. I was on a plane full of people flying in for the Super Bowl this weekend, and most of them were coming in from the Carolina direction, you know. And they, you know, so the conversations there, and I tell them, well, I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, where not pulling for Peyton Manning is just considered a sin, and because we love him there, and but I really like Cam Newton. I just think he's cool, and so I just feel like we can't lose. Is that whoever wins, I'm going to be happy about something about it. But I would love for Peyton to go out in style just because he's Peyton, and. See, he came back to play football for Tennessee in his senior year, and everyone thought, canonize him. I don't know what he's going to do next year when he retires, but if he wants to run for governor of Tennessee, it's his for the asking. But in the fourth point, that God does not need to be particularly involved in daily life except when you need him, I call this the God of the neutral zone. That I think the underlying drive for this aspect of our culture can generally be described as secularism. Secularism is not a belief that there is no God, but that whoever God is or whoever you believe him to be, he should generally stay put and keep his nose out of our business. You know? Keep your God out of my womb. Okay? That's my private property. This is that. And so that God should mind his own business except when asked, like Regina Spektor. When your plane begins to shake, then I want God to be involved. I'm an advocate, for instance, as an Orthodox priest, of wearing cassocks. I was an Episcopal clergyman for 18 years and wore my collar, so I've learned that experience as well. But I also know that the ante's really raised when you have a cassock. Collars are one thing, but cassocks are another thing altogether. And it is, I believe, the invasion of the secular, normal, neutral space that people would like to have is like a sacrament, just drops down in the middle of the marketplace. And it's really delightful to shop like this in Walmart in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And as we border on deep Appalachia, and you know, one of the things I love is occasionally, I was shopping late one night. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was out for something, and I'm wandering around Walmart, because you can. And there's this guy sees me, and he ducks around the other side of the aisle so I can't see him, and he goes, Mazel Tov! And I thought, you dumb hick. I went looking for the guy because I don't mind people picking on me as an Orthodox Christian, but I really don't like them picking on Jews. And, you know, and I may not be one, but that's about the closest thing he could figure. I love that. And Sorry about your people, you know. But it is. I have been flipped off by a cabbie in London. I have been cursed in Dallas, Texas. I have been spat on. This is just, you know. Well, you know, other guys, we're told when we go to England, our bishops have told us, if you're in London, don't wear your cassock. It's pretty not good right now. You get out of London and everybody's English and polite. But in London, I don't know what happened to them there. Maybe English are good if you spread them out and don't get them all in one place. But that's what the French said. But anyway, but you bring a presence into this so-called neutral zone, the secular thing. And, you know, I mean, it's like in Mexico, when they secularized in their revolution, clergy not allowed to appear as clergy in public. They actually had to pass a special law when the Pope went there a little while back to allow the Pope to wear a Pope costume, and you know, because it was against the law. They did the same thing in Turkey, both of them under the heading called secular, you know, in which the only ones it affects is you know who, you know, us and the Catholics. The rest of them, you know, Protestants, fine, don't make them dress like that. But here's the first of the great questions that I want to ask in this. What is the truth of the modern project of redefining what it means to human? Does it work? Who does it serve? Does it work, and who does it serve? The first thing we should notice about the modern project and its approach to becoming human is that it's actually pretty much open-ended. It doesn't have an answer to what's your goal. Okay? There's no particular definition of what it means to be human. At the very most, it's a project, kind of working on it, making it up as we go. If we are autonomous centers of consciousness, then we're free of everything around us. It would be true, as my dear mother often said to me as a child, you can be anything you want to be. She was wrong. You can be, that's the kind of thing mothers say to children. You know you can be anything you want to be? No, I can't. You know, I want to be rich. Somewhere in my 40s as a priest, it dawned on me that I wasn't ever going to be rich. You know, in your 20s, you think you can be anything you want to be, and maybe that option is open. In your 40s, the options start shutting down, and I realized I wasn't ever going to be rich, nor my brothers. So anyway, but there is always the lottery. The problem with the modern project isn't just the notion that I can be anything I want to be, but that I can only be what I want to be. All I need from the world is for it to get out of the way of my freedom and let me choose my own future. And so we have increasing laws to keep everybody getting out of your way so that you can choose and invent your own future, that you can be your own modern project of what it is to be human and redefine yourself. Of course, this explains our culture's fascination with the future. Everything is about what we're going to become. Whatever we have been is history, as they say, and now it's in the rearview mirror, and what's behind me doesn't matter. This also explains our culture's fascination with free choice. For only if I'm free from constraint can I possibly choose my own future. You know, one of the great restraints that's such a hassle in life is grades. Don't you think? I mean, I could be a great student if it weren't for that teacher judging me. You know, actually, I could probably have a serious conversation with this at your local school board, and it would be engaged. I mean, it's California after all, right? And so in Tennessee, we still do like to judge people, and officially as a government project. But the more freedom we think we have, the greater our possibilities and the wider and more fruitful our choices will be so that I can finally choose a really great future. But is this what it really means to be human? Are we, in fact, autonomous centers of consciousness? Do we self-actualize, that is, more or less create ourselves through our choices and decisions? Because the simple fact of the matter is that that's not true. We are not rightly described as an autonomous center of consciousness. Our choices and our decisions are but minor parts of who we truly are. Now, if you are a teenager or in your 20s, that will not sound true. Because one of the big deals about being a teenager or in your 20s is that you have a lot of big choices to make. My oldest daughter, she was a really good student. She blew the top. I think she only missed one on her SATs or something like that. And she had a stack of college catalogs. It was, a couple of feet high. Colleges sending to her, they wanted her. I told her, I said, I understand you're not that good a quarterback, but the academics is pretty good. And I remember her sitting one day, and it was such a honest thing. She said, Papa, she goes, where I go to college could affect the rest of my life. She said, how can I possibly make a decision about that? Wow. Yeah. How could I make a decision about a thing like that? Well, the truth is, you can't. And it's the wrong spirituality that's born of a notion that I can choose my future, that I get to invent myself. As it was, she wound up going to the University of Alabama. It's a heretic. But she went to the University of Alabama, and they gave her the scholarship, and they had a big dinner at the Club LeConte in downtown Knoxville, and all of the Alabama alums, all 15 of them, gathered together, and they had a coach who had been on Bear Bryant's staff, came in, and he was giving a pep talk to the alums and stuff like that. And they were honoring my daughter because they gave her Alabama's top scholarship, just one a year, and like that. And we finished this, and she said to me, she said, Papa, she goes, why were they talking about football? And she said, and who is Bear Bryant? Glory to God. Anyway. But we do not get to choose. Our choice is just a minor part of who we are. Our embryonic life that we all began with does not likely include self-reflection or self-awareness. It certainly includes pain and probably pleasure and comfort, but it doesn't have a reflection of the things we consider to be consciousness. And in fact, consciousness itself changes over a lifetime. What a child of two has is distinctly different from a man of 62, which I am. There's the answer to when I was born. A man of 89 with advanced Alzheimer's is still yet different in his form of consciousness. But all of these, from the embryo to the man with advanced Alzheimer's, all of them belong to what it actually means to be human. This is what it means to be human. It's not something that just happened at X point in the womb. It's not something that you lost. I hear people say, I worked 2 years as a hospice chaplain. I've seen a lot out in the mountains of Tennessee. And, I would hear people say about a loved one who with Alzheimer's that this is not my father, or my father is not here anymore. And I'm thinking, yes, he is. He has some brain problems. And that's all it is. It's a brain problem. The guy you chatted with is not the same thing as person. What it is to be person is the whole of our humanity, and it includes our illness, including if I can't talk, move, and all I do is drool. I'm still a human being, as fully human as any shopper in America. What has happened is that we redefine what it is to be human as in what can actually shop and vote. And this is not the meaning of what it is to be human. This is what it is to be a cog in a wheel of an economy that just wants you to shop and consume. And when you're too little to consume, and when you can't make a decision to shop, let's just call them not human so we can get rid of them. This is an attack on our humanity. On our humanity, what it means to be human. If you cannot honor the man who has no memory, then you've lost your memory of what it is to be a human being. This is what it is to be human. We must honor these things. We must honor this. I grew up in the rural South, primarily among Baptists. In fact, I was actually born a Baptist in South Carolina, which is true of almost everyone born in South Carolina, including the Catholics. But in that piece of pure Americana, for instance, the notion of infant baptism was not only rejected, it was thought as somehow perverse. that only an adult fully capable of making their own choices could possibly qualify for baptism. And in fact, that just seems logical to an American. We're going to wait until they grow up and choose for themselves. I'm thinking, why don't you do that with school? Wait until they're like 8 or 9 and able to begin to make a decision for themselves and see if they want to go to school. Maybe this kid wants to be stupid. And he needs to be allowed to self-actualize as an idiot, Because I can tell there's some people who have self-actualized as idiots. And most of them are in Congress. But anyway, this American notion, the Baptists are just very, very American. In fact, the majority of Protestant America has become opposed to infant baptism. When I was an Episcopal priest, I would meet people all the time who did not want to have their children baptized because they had the idea that they wanted to wait and let them choose for themselves. It's an American notion. They're old enough to choose. It's odd that we do this, and yet we do. The simple fact of life is that most of our existence, the vast majority of our existence is in fact given to us. It's given to you. We don't choose our race. We don't choose our gender. I know. We don't choose our nationality of birth. We don't choose our language. We don't choose our family of origin. The religion we are born into is likely, although less likely in America to be the religion of your adulthood, but it's still there. You don't get to choose your economic status of what you're born into. The number one predictor of success in America is parents. It's the golden rule. Those who have the gold rule. And they send their children to one of the 2 preferred colleges. And then they become powerful and they own and they buy and sell the rest of us. You didn't get to choose it. Now, I know many of the things in my list, such as gender or even race, are currently being asserted as matters of personal choice, or rather people say how I self-identify, which is a quintessential part of the modern project. But these are simply the latest and most extreme examples of the modern project. As much as we might want to have the freedom to self-identify, it's problematic at best, which is why people have to argue about it. If it were apparent, there wouldn't be an argument. But I can only have it if I can argue and make you convinced to back off and respect what I said as my self-identification. We're having huge things going on at University of Tennessee. Last year, they've got a diversity department in Tennessee, which is really kind of odd, but anyhow, in our culture down there. But they had a diversity department, and it put out a list of approved pronouns. That did not go over well in the state of Tennessee. The legislature, which has a supermajority of Republicans in both houses and the state house, it's to the right of Alabama. And anyway, it is, they're studying on withdrawing funding from the university until they shut this down. But it's an argument, and it's back going on again. The group presented 5 pages of demands to the university. But you see, demand is an assertion of freedom, an assertion of choice. It is the modern project. And the truth is, most of who you are and most of who you will be, you were born that way. I'm the father of 4 children. My children are all fractals. That's a nice little mathematical term of something that's sort of not a duplicate of the other thing, but it rhymes with it. In fact, all 3 of my daughters are fractals of their mother. They just look like their mom. I'm not certain what my son, who he looks like, someone in the family. But, and as adults, I listen to them talk, and you know what? They're going through my crap. I didn't teach them to be like that. They just are like that. And the older now I am, at age 62, I realize most of the issues in my life, they're my father's demons. It's like I inherited my own dad's demons. And hopefully in this generation, I'm able to battle them a little better than he did, or not. But that's pretty well what it is. I am working out the life and the DNA of my ancestry. It just is what it is. It was given to me. The illusion of choice is another problem. I cannot, in fact, choose to be someone other than myself, and myself has many, many givens about its existence. And it's here that I'll return to the question of why these modern assumptions are so powerful and attractive. I think there's two primary factors. One is the illusion that we are, in fact, in charge of our own lives. We like that notion. In charge. You know, one of the problems about anxiety is that anxiety is the feeling that you're not in charge. And that somebody's going to do something wrong, you know, out of your control. And, you know, you get anxious about it because I want to be in charge of it. It's a source of chronic anxiety. Talking to someone a while back, a young woman who was wrestling with a disease that is potentially life-threatening, although she may live a long, full life with it, but wrestling with it and wrestling with all of the issues you might imagine associated with it. But she was talking to me, and I finally said to her, you know what? You need to die. You know? You die now, you won't have to do this every day. You know, I had a heart attack about 2.5 years ago. It was not too bad a heart attack. You know, I lived. It's my favorite kind of heart attack. And but I remember laying on the table in the hospital and wondering, is this my first or last? And, you know, and they offered to give me a little something as they're running this catheter up into me and looking at my heart. And I said, no, you know, if this is the last one, I've got an appointment coming up here shortly, and I have things to take care of. So you guys just do it, and I'm going to breathe and pray. Because, you know, if this thing's going to finish up at the great judgment seat, I need to do some quick repenting. Get me a priest. Something. But, you know, it's actually been one of the most freeing things in my life. You know, because I didn't die then, but I will, and a lot sooner than later. You know, I'm 62. What do I get? If I get another 25 years, I'll have matched my dad, and I'll have done well. Who knows? I don't know that. But I also know that it is inevitable and not something other than if I go crazy and choose it in the wrong way that I have any choice over. The myth of autonomy and self-actualization caters to our passions, to our desires. We like to shop, and in our shopping we imagine that we are choosing what we want, but in fact the game is rigged. Deeply rigged. Many, maybe even most of the things we imagine ourselves to want were suggested to us through various cultural purveyors, like advertising. I had my girls when they were little, the first two. They would sit in front of the TV Saturday morning watching the cartoons and the commercials that come on. And as a father, you're trying to raise them right, and I would sneak up behind them and I'd whisper to them, all they want is your money. And my oldest girl went, ooh. And my second girl said, how much? They were wired that way from the beginning. My first child, I wouldn't go shopping with that girl for nothing. She just won't buy anything. She's not interested. My second girl is like, just loves shopping. But, you know, it is, but so they didn't even get a chance to figure out who they were. They just are that. But if we were truly free in our choices, stores would have no idea what to stock. Think about it. If you were really free in your choices, you know, how would they know what to stock? How do they know what to stock? Because every time you Google, they know what you chose. And in fact, when you Google, those folks over there in Mountain View, they've got it all figured out. Every time you Google, they give you answers geared to what the last thing was you Googled. They know what you want. You know, it really frustrates me because I go looking for things in Orthodoxy and I'll type in a question and the answer comes up my blog. And I think, I know what that is, but I want to know what somebody else said, you know. But they said, but you go to this site all the time. I think, yes, I do go to the site all the time. It's my site, you know. But that's Google, you know, and they do the same thing with your shopping. I mean, I don't have a lot of shopping filters on my stuff, and I just notice if I look at something on Amazon, and then 5 minutes later, I'm on Facebook, by George, there's an ad for it, you know? And, you know, I'm just going to, someday just going to, you know, kind of experiment on on Amazon and see how many things they might offer me on Facebook. But it's all connected, and they know, and it builds, and we're being marketed to. There was a church starting between Oak Ridge and Clinton, Tennessee, and they had an article in the paper interviewing a young man, young evangelical, knows how to start and build churches fast. He's going to get him a little mega church going. And he said the first thing he did was market research. Okay, I'm thinking at St. Anne, we generally like to have people. And we've noticed there are some in our area, Tennessee. But he was doing more careful marketed research and determined that the best market was young 30-something-year-old women. I thought, well, I'd have gone for 24. But anyway. But it's young 30-something-year-old women. And then the first choice they had to make based on other parts of the market research was what kind of music to have in the megachurch, because he says the music will determine your congregation. I thought, well, that explains why I got so many old Byzantines in my congregation. But, I mean, it's down to a market thing. And they did it. They were building them a megachurch built on their market research. It's not exactly the same thing as preaching the gospel. Get you a church of 30-somethings who like your music. Wow. Freedom. Consumer's paradise. Our consumption is rooted in our passions, our desires. The Fathers describe a basic cycle of human existence: pain and pleasure. Odini, hidani. Odini, hidani. Pain, pleasure. We seek pleasure and enjoy it, but then it gives us pain. Got that hangover. So I seek more pleasure, enjoy it, then it gives us pain. Try to avoid the pain only to discover that fleeing one pain often leads to an even greater pain. I tell the addicts that I work with that you are actually working on a fundamental desire. You want to feel better, but you keep making bad addictive choices about how you feel in order to avoid suffering. And the mystery that we know as Christians is, in fact, you're going to need to embrace suffering if you want to be well. The way down is the way up. The way of the cross is the way of life. But we live addicted lifestyles, addicted to the passions. Choice is simply a front man for the passions. Self-actualization is just a front man. Modernity is a front man for the passions. It's simply the case that choices and decisions are a very narrow range of our existence. The older you get, the fewer your choices become. I didn't know this when I was young. I know it now. I've got fewer and fewer choices. In the last analysis, you will lie on a bed, if you're lucky, with no choice left other than to accept your death. That's reality. So think with me a minute about these words of Steve Jobs, California's finest. And Apple's founder, and this is him. He was thinking out loud about his impending death. He said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." Almost everything, he says, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you're going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You're already naked. There's no reason not to follow your heart. Well, I can think of some. But anyway, no one wants to die, he says. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet death is the destination we all share, he says. No one has ever escaped it. And that's how it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It's an interesting thing for Jobs, the inventor, to say death is the best invention of life. It's life's change agent. I guess it is. It clears out the old to make way for the new. It's an inadequate theology, but it is something I resonate with because it is the voice of a man of a certain age to a man of a certain age who says your death is important. You know, monastics have always known this in Orthodoxy. The remembrance of death is an absolute essential for the monastic way of life. Way of life. The modern version of the human project, becoming our self-authenticating consumers. I noted in the beginning that we are in the midst of a crisis, particularly when seen from a classical Christian perspective, for the Christian faith has at its heart, as I noted, certain claims about what it means to be human. Christianity says to be human is to be like Christ. And I should note parenthetically that the entire history of human rights and human dignity is rooted in our Christian faith. I said that earlier. Pretty much, as I said, pretty much everything we have is a gift. The most aspects of our personality are set long before we've made any choices. We're born into a culture, a language, a family. Our DNA contains a record of the whole of humanity stretching back to whatever we were before we were human, or whatever that means, depending on your theological point of view, or whatever, however you want to see that, or your science. But, you know, I am my ancestors. My DNA got here through something. Apparently, they told me I've even got some Neanderthal, which explains one of my uncles. But we are not autonomous. We are deeply and profoundly interconnected. Some of y'all might even be cousins of me or one another. St. Silouan said, "My brother is my life. You are my life. You are my life, and I am yours." The modern secular world often views the givenness of our existence as a curse, an obstacle to be overcome, to be modified more to our liking. We discovered that we cannot bear our gender, and make no mistake, that's a very difficult problem for some, that we should be treat with care and with kindness and gentleness. We don't like the shape of our face. We need poutier lips or a smaller chin. We want larger breasts or hair on our head. Whatever it is, we want what has not been given to us. And so we enter a new phase of human existence. I read a recent article by Mark Schiffman, associate professor of classical studies at Villanova, on what is described as transhumanism. So the latest little cool thing is over in England. The project that some imagine for our future is in which we overcome our biological limits through various technologies and manipulations. It's not science fiction. It's already becoming part of our reality. And he cites Steve Fuller, who's a professor at Warwick University, who has coined the project Humanity 2.0. Oh, great. According to Fuller, this is a quote, "This agenda is driven by the same inspiration that is the source of all religion. This," he says, "is the human capacity for self-transcendence." Yes, so I can imagine it. Work on me and give me some more parts so I can transcend myself. God help us. He says science is the highest fulfillment of what makes us human. But forgive me, but just notice how white and middle class that is. I mean, who can afford science? We're talking about transcending ourselves. That's just going to work in a village in Africa. I mean, how about clean water and screen doors from mosquitoes? How about some basic humanity? But we've got somebody in England talking about transhuman, human 2.0, because he can afford microchips. What is here described as self-transcendence is actually just the application of radical freedom and high technology to the givenness of human existence. It is first ridiculously expensive, the ultimate in designer consumerism, right? I get a whole new me. I had a makeover. I had a makeover, yeah. C.S. Lewis, in a lot of essays and at least 2 novels, confronted this strange modern drive to completely obscure nature. He called it the abolition of man. He also embodied it in a character he called the Unman in his Perelandra trilogy, who, when asked what it is you want to be, could have no idea. They just wanted to be some continuation of the human race. They wanted to go explore other planets and to spread. And he said, why? He couldn't give a reason. It was just this modern project, this drive to go do, to make, to be, but no idea what it is you want to do or make or be. So the first understanding in the Christian tradition of what it is to be human and to become human is that it is a tradition. It's handed to us. Paradosis, the Greek term for it, that which is handed down. What I am as a human being was handed down to me from my mom and my dad. A whole chunk of it's in my DNA. A lot of it flows through my tongue. I talk like I do because my mother could talk your head off. And she told stories. And I learned to tell stories, and it drives my brother crazy, because I'm just like my mama. And it drove me crazy the day I discovered that. Traditionally, rightly understood, is what is given to us. It's the first and foremost thing is that our life is traditioned to us. For it says, "Thou it was who brought us out of non-existence into being," we pray. The tradition is not given to me out of thin air. It's handed down to me from my parents. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land. And what is given to me is my humanity. My humanity is not a creation of my own. It's not a choice. It's not a so-called act of self-transcendence. It is a gift. The life that is rightly lived turns in wonder and awe towards the gift and allows it to unfold. This is the root of our life as Christians. The life of giftedness, the spiritual life lived in giftedness, is simply thanksgiving. We are created to be Eucharistic beings, that is, beings who give thanks. We are the beings who, of all creation that we know, are able to recognize the giftedness of our life and give it voice, to give thanks to God, who is the Lord and giver of life. Tradition, that which has been given to us, is not a theological position among others. It's actually a right regard for human life. It's the same life that sees the world itself as a gift and cares for it with thanksgiving and kindness. The world has not been given to us as the arena for our technology. It's been given to us as the place we live. In many ways, the modern drive to transcend the givenness of the world has been an engine of alienation. Someone I do spiritual direction with was asking me about being present, struggling with that. How can I be present? I said, well, you don't actually get a choice. You just kind of are present. And the deal is learning to be what you is. To quote a little turtle I remember in a cartoon series when I was a boy, you've got to be what you are. Be that. Be that. You have to reinvent it. We're not making the world, I'll probably close with this, just watching my time. We're not making the world into a better place. This is one of the great illusions of the modern project, that we're making the world a better place, we're making the world a better world, we're making a better man. No, we're not. We're not really any different. I've been hearing confessions for 35 years. We really are not making any progress. Yeah. Same sins. And the thing is, that's most disturbing is after hearing these confessions of others for 35 years, I realize my confession hasn't changed either in 35 years. Despite the priesthood, despite standing in the burning fire, the presence of God at the holy altar, I am what I am. And not making the world a better place. A lot of this is a rhetoric that our culture buys in. It helps us do wars. I mean, what war wasn't fought for making a better world? Only to set the stage for the next war. I wrote a while back that we're actually still in World War I. There have only been occasional lulls in the fighting. Almost every conflict since World War I has been based on the Treaty of Versailles, signed after World War I, including the Second World War. The entire Cold War, communism, all of that result of World War I. We're just fighting. That is the essential modern war, and we're still fighting it. The Middle East, guess when they drew the lines that created the higgledy-piggledy mess of the Middle East? Treaty of Versailles. End of World War I, so we could keep fighting our sons and daughters, talking to someone, realizing that our wars in the Middle East have gone on so long, you got people whose grandkids can almost fight in the same war they were in when they served. This is craziness. But this is our modern world. We're going to make the world a better place. So I get that new Apple phone, I know I'll be right. But we're not becoming a moral culture. We do give new freedoms to certain people, but it doesn't make them better. Some of it just serves the illusion that I now have this freedom, I'm going to be a better person. What is the proper nature of our life? If human nature is indeed largely fixed and given to us, traditioned to us, what is that nature and how is it fulfilled? I'm going to have to leap to it. I knew I would always go too long at the front. But we are created in the image and likeness of God. And it's important to understand this because it's been obscured. You ask, what does it mean to be created in the image and likeness of God? And people start spinning out theories of what that means. Well, it's actually very clear. It's not clear. It's buried and hidden in the text of Scripture. We're told in Revelations that the Lamb was slain before the foundation of the earth. Now, that's a great mystery, that the Lamb who was slain on Golgotha was mystically always slain, or certainly before the foundation of the earth. The image according to which we are created is the crucified God. Human beings, the crucifixion of Christ. Father John Beer, I like the way he says this, that on the cross, when Christ says, "It is finished," he announces the completion of God's human project. It is fulfilled. It is completed. This is what we are created to be. That what it means to be human is imaged in the self-emptying life of love that is God on the cross. This is what it means to be human. That I take up the image of the crucified. As the elder Sophronius said, the way down is the way up. The way of shame is the way of life. And this is a mystery. This is something that we have as a treasure in our life of orthodoxy. Everything from the traditions that we have of fasting. We have a tradition of not getting to make a lot of choices. When I was an Anglican, Lent was a time for choosing. What are you giving up for Lent? You got to make a choice. Because I understand that giving up M&Ms is going to make me closer to God. What are you giving up for Lent? In Orthodoxy, we tell you what you're giving up for Lent. Everything. Can you eat it? Suck dirt. I mean, it's just, what are you going to get? We were glad to get it. But what is meat, fish, wine, dairy, oil, like that? I discovered actually over the years the only possible way to survive Lent with any dignity at all is to move to Romania, where they know how to cook vegetables in a wondrous way. So that's my plan. When I retire, I'm going to go to Romania every year for Lent, and fast. But Orthodoxy is full of things that teach you can't choose, or the choice you make is the choice to empty yourself. You are not a consumer. You have the dignity of the crucified God, and we're going to help you fulfill that. To provide a community that is the church, that is the place where we can live out the suffering that is inherent to what it is to be human in this world. The church is to be a safe place where people can be allowed to bear suffering, where I do not add to the shame that you already have, but in fact support you so that you can, as Elder Sophronius said, bear a little shame. The church does not need to be a shaming place. It has to be the place where we can support those who are already shamed because Christ bore our shame. We have to do that. So I know at St. Anne we have a lot of wide latitude. We started our mission in 1998. And we had barely begun when I had people who were concerned about that they want to make me a clothes police, And I don't know what issues you may have in your parish. You may have a dress code. I've got kind of a dress code, but it's pretty wide. I tell people don't wear like wrong advertising on your T-shirts, and shirt and shoes required for certain. I mean, if they come in barefoot, it's Tennessee. Of course, you can come in barefoot, but you got to let people. You got to let people live. They've got to bear themselves. We can't put barriers. We have to invite them, and they'll get better in a true way. They'll be able to bear the cross, but they need the grace to bear the cross. And they'll come in, sometimes in all kinds of shape and bent out of shape. But we have to be a kind of community that can support that. We have to give up the great modern drive to fix things. Most things can't be fixed. Even people, it can't be fixed. This was probably the most common upsets in the life of our congregation. Someone comes to me, Father, you've got to do something about him. If you hear how he sounds when he sings. And I think, yeah, that's how he sounds. You're right, do something. No. You do something. You put up with it. Why? Because he's your life. He sounds funny. You sound even funnier right now. You think he can be fixed. What is wrong with you? Who told you to fix your neighbor? Who told you to fix your neighbor? You have no commandment from God to fix your neighbor. Who told you to do that? This is what a cross looks like. Standing next to someone in church who sounds awful, who smells bad, whose manners you don't like, or something like that. We had 2 autistic children, teenagers, who were in our congregation. At first, when we were in mission and they first came, it sort of disturbed me. I remember shamefully standing in the altar because one of them moaned and had difficult problems like that. And we're a mission, we're trying to grow. And I shamefully stood in the altar and I said, God, this is not going to work. It's weird enough. We're Orthodox. We've got pictures on the wall. There's incense. There's candles. I dress funny, and I'm in the Southeast and they come in and now there's moaning. What are you thinking? I just sort of playing Moses in there, advising God, and God said, this is for your salvation. This is for our salvation. They made us better people. We learned to bear them. We learned to love them. We learned to help their parents bear them. They just became our brothers and sisters. They became our life. I'll never forget the day that the girl, the younger of the 2, the one who moaned, eventually I baptized them. They were, or chrismated them. She came to the cup one day, and she'd usually come to the cup, but like most autistic kids could not or would not make eye contact. One day she came to the cup and looked me straight in the eyes, and it shook me to my core. I told somebody, I said, that child has made a greater journey today than any of us will probably make in our lifetime. To journey through all of the inner noise and turmoil of this condition to make eye contact with me. But she was a gift from God. We became a truly, properly tolerant people. The word tolerant in the Latin means to bear the weight. We bore the shame of her disease, of her condition. It's not a disease, it's just a condition. We bore the shame of it. Some people wanted us to have a cry room, to put them in a room. Thought, no, the nave is a cry room. Weep and howl. Cry out to God. I had a man who said he didn't like to be in the church when they were there. It distracted his prayers. I said, who told you? It distracted your prayers. I said, you're just watching yourself pray and you're thinking about praying. You pray for this child and God will hear you. If you have mercy, God will hear you. If you want grace from God, and there's no other reason to pray, if you want grace from God, give grace to this child and you will receive. Give and it will be given to you. God has sent you an opportunity. This is what it is to be human, not to make a choice, to fix it, put them away so I can't see them. No. We must not put them away. We must bring them in and we must bear it. I have to love my other self. This is what it is to be human. And this is what we have to say. to our secular world. The church, the Orthodox Church, is the last traditional form of Christianity. It is the last place in the world as Christians that is living what was handed down to it. That's what we do. And some of us are converts and we're getting into it, learning how to do this. This is God's gift to us, and we learn to embrace the gift. And so we say to others, come and with us learn what it is to be human. Will we change the culture or win the culture war? I don't think so. That's an American question. We want to know how to fix the culture. Ain't going to happen. Where is the commandment that tells us to do that? We have no such commandment. We have a commandment to love one another. We gather together, we do that, we come together, and by the grace of God, we become human. And we keep offering that invitation to our brothers and sisters all around us. I said to Father at breakfast this morning that I don't like the bumper sticker that says Orthodox Church since 33 AD or something like that. I don't like that. If you've got it, I'll tell you why I don't like it. It's because it's not old enough. The Orthodox Church began when God said, "Let there be light." It says in Ephesians, the first chapter, that God has purposed to gather together in one all things in Christ Jesus. He created, says, "Let there be light." It fruits, and the end of it, Paul says, to be gathered together in one in Christ Jesus. Orthodoxy is a word for it. God forbid it should become a brand of Christianity. It just is that life of God given to us that invites the world and everything into communion with God. And that's what we're about, healing people, helping them to become fully human in the image of the crucified God who created us, to whom we give glory. We'll do some questions and answers now. Thank you. Thank you all. Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if this is a question, but maybe more a comment. I'd be curious to hear your comments on. Maybe a question, I don't know. But, as you were talking, I was just thinking about how it seems like much of our human history, especially since the Industrial Revolution, has been around trying to exploit and carve the world to meet our needs, and we were under the impression that we'd be able to do that, to fight whatever boundaries was given to us in the world. And, I'm thinking maybe since, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, we kind of realized, that's not going to work out, we're not going to be able to do it. And now the shift has gone on the person. Well, we can't change the world around us, so we'll just change the way we are to the world, And, I see it as inevitable that one day, I guess we'll see that doesn't work either. I don't know, do you think we'll see that? And do you think we're just going to be stuck in the cycle of, if we can't change us, then maybe we will change the world again? Or do you think we'll move on to something else?
Well, it's a very good comment and a good observation. One of the things that always makes me hopeful is because nature is a given, and you got one, I got one. And no matter what kind of silliness I want to get into, nature just is nature. And people can self-identify or do things like that, or just destroy the heck out of the family and do all kinds of crazy stuff. But nature just abides. And what we're talking about in terms of being human, if it's actually true to our nature, nature gets a big vote, and it won't be outvoted in the long run. These things collapse. One of my sort of symptoms of American choice is American suburban life and urban sprawl, which actually is just like one of the uglier things on the planet. It just is. And I look at that, it's like an icon of choice and consumerism. And in a way, I do hate the fact that, as you say, sort of turning to the individual, that someday I'll wake up and realize I've been turned into a suburb, and it's not working. But the thing is that's a gift of God too. When I wake up and it's not working, then, the number one task for us as Orthodox Christians is to be here so that when someone comes looking for us, we'll be here. And we're spreading. The grace of God is at work, is planting us. There's many of us who've already woken up and decided the project is over, wasn't working. I told someone that, in fact, I was cradle Orthodox, based on God says, let there be light, but that I lived in schism for myself for 45 years. And until I was restored and repented of the schism and came to my senses, returned to my right mind, and begun this slow journey of trying to become the human version of Stephen. So, in the scripture, it actually talks about one of the reasons God shortened our lives was for our sake. He starts off, the patriarchs are living 100 years, 800 years or something. But then he says he shortens our life because basically, so you won't get into too much trouble. There's only so much you can do in 80 years. And at age 60, you already realize you're almost there. And so the last 20, you're pretty well, to spend repenting for the first 60. But, he's built it in. He's built in some things to help us be sane. So, anyway. Yeah, the question is, what do I think about Joel Osteen, or what do I say about that? Well, he's not Christianizing consumers, he's consumerizing Christianity. In fact, I do say some things about it in the talk this evening, I believe, I think that's right. The most successful churches in America are the ones that conform to culture and ride the wave of the present. Pick the music that works and do it. But it is always an ephemeral wave that passes and changes. What I thought of as traditional Baptists when I was a kid sang the really favorite songs of the revivals of the 19th century that seem so passé now, and that aren't sung anymore. And the ones that are being sung now, they won't be remembered either. But you know what? They really aren't worth remembering. John of Damascus, now that's worth remembering. Isaac of Syria, now that's worth remembering. And they will teach you what it is to be human. When a song's been around for 1,000 years, it's worth listening to. It's the song of God. But, these things, they come and they go. My grandchildren won't know who Joel Osteen was. They will not know the name. My children don't know who Billy Sunday was. Never heard the name. And on we can go. They come and go. They know the name of St. Nicholas. They know the name of many others. I say as a priest that in preferring the tradition, that I live in obedience. I'm a married man, I obey my wife. I'm a rector, I obey my council. I'm a priest, I obey my bishop. And that's pretty good. I had a young priest who was fresh out of seminary. He was assigned to me as a second priest. He was serving with me. And some liturgical question came up that asked something, I don't know, doors or whatever it was, and he's perennial, what do you do? And someone asked me about it, and I said, well, I'll call the bishop. And he says to me later that day, he says, Father, you have a very Cyprianic view of the bishop. The bishop's everything, right? And he said, you could make this decision yourself. I said, look, I was an Episcopal priest. I had to do this, 24/7, 365 for 18 blinking years. It was the Burger King church. Have it your way. I had to serve 3 masses a Sunday for people who wouldn't even talk to each other. It was awful. I said, what a joy. And you'll learn. I said, I don't care how I do the liturgy. All I care to do is be in obedience. Why should I have an opinion on a thing like this? Opinion is actually in the Greek for opinion. It's a sinful word. It's not a good thing to have an opinion. Be of one mind, the scripture says. If you have opinions, you don't yet have an Orthodox mind. You've got an American mind. Opinions are like belly buttons. Everybody's got one, I cleaned that up, but anyway. It is... part of what's going on here in terms of learning to be human, if I can say this, using that word spirituality or a spiritual orientation, how we face life, there is a spirituality of learning to live with givenness. What do you think monks are for? Monks are about life and obedience. I actually think that if there were to be salvation for American culture, it would absolutely first require tons of monastics. There was an imagination at a certain midpoint in the 20th century among some Orthodox, particularly in my jurisdiction, that there was going to be some sort of new orthodoxy without monasticism. And you find some kind of, because they thought it was disappearing or something, it wasn't happening. They didn't see what would happen as soon as we got rid of the commies. And, it's flowering and flourishing. Even in America, when there had been, 3 monasteries, more or less, around 1970, now there's 50-something or more, and they're small, but they're growing. How can we teach people, for instance, how do you overthrow the sexual revolution? It's going to take celibates. I've talked to college kids about sex. They have a thing at UT called Sex Week each year now. God help us. Anyway, they have Sex Week, and they invite outside speakers to come in, and they pass out things, and all sorts of stuff goes on there. And golly gee, I had to check my wife out like a library book when I was in college. I did go to her dorm and sign her out, and you had to have her back by midnight, and none of the pages better be bent. But these kids having Sex Week, and I told them, I've talked to groups of them, I said, it is not possible for anybody in college to know anything about sex. You might know how to copulate. You might know how to fool around a little bit. But sex is something you learn after you've been married a long time to the same person, had children, and maybe buried one. Because you don't know what sex is for until you have a child. You don't even know what a child is for until they could talk back, And it's a fearful thing. It is a fearful thing. Sex is about making babies. If that's not obvious, then you need to return back to humanity 1.0. That's what it's for. Dogs know it, cats know it. It's what it's for. It happens to be fun because he's a good God and he loves mankind. But it's for children. But we, oddly enough, won't know that without monastics who tell us it's not necessary to our utter existence. They can begin to restore, and we can have a model of someone who's not so eaten up with Freud that they think that if I don't do it, I'll die. It's insanity. But orthodoxy takes a lot of things. When America has as many monasteries as Russia, or as many monasteries per person as Romania, then we might begin to have an impact. Because as the monasteries and the parishes would numer around them. I'm serious about that. So pray for monastic vocations in America. I think maybe actually one of the single most important things we can pray for is Orthodox people, because it is sanity. And thank God for its renaissance throughout the world, the number. 3 monasteries, the end of the Soviet Union. There's now nearly 1,000. That's amazing. Nothing in the history of the church equaled that on that level, yeah.
I'm kind of interested in you talk about choice. Here in this modern project of California, there's, which I report on, and it seems like there's a lot of efforts to reduce our choices in the name of some of the ideas that you promote, ending consumerism. You mentioned sprawl, which you don't like, but like for instance in the Bay Area, there's been a 30-year effort to stop urban sprawl, and the result is you need to be a multimillionaire to own a home there and to raise a family. So I agree with you when you're talking about what we should do as Orthodox, but as a society, what this ends up a lot is efforts to reduce choice, which often, we're sinful people, we make a lot of foolish choices, but the alternative is to give other sinful people power over sinful people to limit their choices. And that often ends up disastrously in the extreme in the Soviet Union. So I just thought maybe you could address that point, because it's the one thing I've been annoyed about in reading your pieces that I haven't felt that you've ever really addressed that.
It's... my politics are just all confused and stuff, frankly. For one thing, I don't know that it's possible to do it very well in an American model. We don't have enough commonality and one-mindedness in a culture to agree on things like that without coercing the daylights out of each other. And so, and I'm not very keen on coercion, but I'm not going to turn total lack of coercion into a virtue. I mean, so in that sense, I'm not a libertarian. I think governments can make laws, and they sometimes have to make some pretty rational decisions that are difficult. And the thing that you do learn from all laws is the unbreakable law is the law of unintended consequences. I try to do this good thing, and I invent 10 bad things. And so I guess that sense, I've always thought of myself as a Burkean conservative, as in change, but be real careful, because a whole lot of stuff you didn't intend to happen is going to happen. And so you do it carefully and cautiously. A little revolution, but very little, like a bit of salt. Too much salt is unedible. But, we're not going to fix it. I like Wendell Berry. He's kind of interesting, but, you wouldn't put him in charge of city planning.
He's a good Kentucky boy.
Yeah, in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, we're the national laboratory, and so our living in Oak Ridge has made it the federal trough. We don't get a lot of choices. It's dictated to us by the feds. And so what they can do is regulate trees and shrubs. Now, I'm in East Tennessee. There are trees everywhere. It's just everywhere. I mean, if you ever go to the South, it's green as Ireland and trees everywhere like that. But we got rules in Oak Ridge about trees and shrubs because they feel like they can. And it's sort of regulation run amok. But I have to apply to move a shrub or something. It's just crazy. But that's government. And in the critique that I offer about modernity, my real goal is not to reconstruct the culture, because it's not so. Let me say this real quick, because I think it's important. I don't mean this as an aside. Someone asked me a question recently that it sounded like I was sort of the position that Niebuhr describes as Christ against culture. No, I am not against culture. An Orthodox Christian cannot be against culture. We believe in culture. Culture is ethos in the Greek. It is simply that system of life that is lived in the community in which you dwell. I believe in culture. Modernity is not our culture. Modernity is a philosophy of culture that dominates the minds of many people, but it's not our culture. American culture is not necessarily synonymous with modernity. Just like modernity does not own technology, neither does it own my culture. And so, if anything, I would say I want to be rethinking, deconstructing, to talk as a postmodernist, to deconstruct modernity so that we can wake up from the matrix and realize that, in fact, I don't have to be a modern. There was a good article last year, I think it was in The Guardian and one of the English papers, an article kind of deconstructing this stuff that they noticed every time there was something really bad that happened in the Middle East, they'd say, these are like some throwbacks to the Middle Ages. As if they're not living in the same world. That can't be modern. That's positively medieval. Okay? We privilege the word modern to describe things that fit this progress success model, choice, freedom, etc. And the other things are, reactionary or whatever that way. And it's really rhetoric. It's not true. In that sense, I think and so I'm just a voice crying in the wilderness. You don't have to be modern. They don't own the drugs. They don't own the toilets. We can live in a technological world without being reduced to consumer units. Yeah.
Father, in our parish, we're mostly a convert parish, and very, very, sincere adults trying to be Orthodox Christians in 21st century California, and dragging our kids kicking and screaming into it. And there's a word about, the modern project to be authentic. And we try really, really hard to be authentic people as Christians, but somehow there's a sense where Orthodoxy becomes like a weird religious overlay in our life.
Yeah.
And human flourishing sounds just wonderful to me right now, where I'm not trying to just impress something on a bunch of people that it just sounds oppressive.
Well, we cannot be, we're not a village in Russia or a village in Greece. We're not going to be that. Someone said to me one time, was talking about American Orthodoxy, and when was the church going to become more American? I said, well, golly gee, St. Anne's and Oak Ridge is very American. He said, what do you mean? I said, we laugh. I tell jokes. You don't do that in Moscow. I'll bet I'm telling you, you don't smile. And he's not done. He's not done. Anyway, he's outraged. But we're American. And even as Father says, people come in and they want to argue about things. Well, yeah, or if you got 2 or 3 Americans, you got 4 opinions, and they're going to do like that. And and God help us. Most of us know for a fact that the Greeks in America brought Greece with them, and they act like it. So God help you. But I got a brother-in-law converted to the Orthodox Church in Waco, and only had a Greek Orthodox church. And he called and told us about it. He was talking to my wife, and he said something about their retreat for the parish council. She goes, oh, Joe, you're not on the parish council, are you? He says, oh, it's worse than that. She says, you're the president? You convert and become the president of the parish council in the Greek Orthodox Church? That's baptism by fire. But, and so we do have to tolerate a lot of things. But we are American. First off, we can't help Americanizing. I mean, my congregation is made up of a bunch of Americans. We just bring it with us. And, we're learning. When we first converted, I didn't know many choices that we did have, So I joked about it. One of the problems about being with cookbook orthodoxy is you don't know what you can leave out of the recipe. So we had the longest possible services because I didn't know where to cut. We don't do them anymore. I remember one year, at Holy Week, we're almost all lying on the floor going, for God's sakes, Father, cut something, just so long. And they don't do it that way in the old country unless you're in a monastery. So I've learned now as I'm much wiser and had more practice and traveled more widely and seen things, how you do it. Orthodoxy in America is very, very American. Some places it feels very ethnic, but it's still ethnic American with a hyphen. And so many of these things just are going to happen because we live it, And there's an old saying that no monastery is founded until its founders are buried. That's certainly true of a parish, I can look ahead, and I talk openly now with my parish council about my retirement, which will be in about 4 years. I don't plan to leave them, but I plan to let them hire someone young, please, who has the energy to keep up with them. I'll travel and talk more and visit with my grandchildren, and I'll still serve as a priest and be around to help. But also it means they're looking, I started at parish in, 98. Now they're thinking about it, what does St. Anne look like without me? I think about looking at St. Anne without me. And I have to meditate on what's the world going to look like without me, and what am I doing for my kids and grandkids? So there's no easy formula, but live it. One more. I'm getting hungry. Oh, yes.
I just usually reduce things to a real simple level, my brain power. When we talk about the topic that you're talking about, my heart goes to my children and my grandchildren. And a lot of times I've felt for years that I just am so uncomfortable with this culture. I'm the one that had no TV with my kids for 20 years and, no video games and all that sort of thing. And so I look at my children and my grandchildren and I fear for them.
Yep.
What would you say?
Well, you won't be able to keep them from your culture. I mean, you can do your best, but then they're there. I've got 4 kids, and they all have their own issues. They're all Orthodox or name themselves as such. Some are more active than others, and they go through their life. I fear for it. Our congregation's about half children. It's one of the shortest congregations in the world. Just lots of them, little people. Not the wee people. But, and it's the most important thing we do. But I know just being a parent, it's just a frightening thing, A, you have no control. You do your best. You have no control. I whispered at my daughters, all they want is your money. You get two different results, you know. You do your best, you shield them. They may rebel and go so much the other direction, they hate you. You don't know. This is how it is. You know, so what do? We believe in God, who works all things together for good. You pray for their salvation. When we were converting, it was very frightening because my oldest child was nearly 18, and that's scary to make a big decision in her life when you're that age. And I remember praying, and my agony before God was, oh God, give me the salvation of my children. Okay? I believe He will do that, but I'm coming to understand now that I will not see it from this side. It will, God willing, they outlive me. I will only see their salvation. And no one understands, nothing is clear until the kingdom of God anyway. You can't judge anything before it's time. So I have prayed and I ask and I live the risk. I live the risk, which is not being, don't despair. You pray, you ask for their salvation, you believe in a good God who's more interested in their salvation than you are. A last story I'll tell. My son was about, he was third grade and began showing real problems and was diagnosed with ADD. And it was causing real problems in adjustments in school. And same as I was a fool praying in an altar complaining about who came to church, I remember just watching him that day in the house and feeling kind of sad. Because at the time, I thought, James is, not going to be like me. And stuff like, I only later found out that I have ADD. He got it from me. But anyway, my children later, when I found out and was diagnosed, they laughed. They said, you didn't know that? Papa, everybody knows that. I mean, your rabbit trails are famous, Papa. Squirrel. But I was there that day and looking at my son and kind of feeling sad. And this is one of about 3 times in my life that it was like bordered on an audible voice from God who said, this is for his salvation. Now, we had some tough times. We wound up in 7th and 8th grade. My wife homeschooled him, and it probably saved his life. But he is one of the finest men I know. I love that boy. He's become an amazingly good man. I don't just say that because I'm his dad. I mean, everybody who knows my son just sort of is almost in awe of what a good man he is. But I also know he wouldn't be the man he is had he not had the problem he had and still has and lives and copes and adjusts with, and he's got one of the best hearts. So no one would ever say, oh, God, give my child ADD. No one would ever say a thing like that. Who would dare pray like that? But God is a good God, and he loves mankind, and all things are working together for good and working for our salvation. We need to pray and live like that. We are Eucharistic beings, so first and foremost, what do? Get up in the morning and give thanks to God always for all things. If you teach your children, Father Alexander Schmemann said, anyone capable of thanksgiving is capable of salvation. So that's one thing to do. What do? Teach them to give thanks, always and for all things. So we got tonight to come. We can do this again. Thank you.